Apparently, I just can't talk today. What I would like to talk about today is biological psychology. I really base this, or my ideas for this presentation, on the medical model. Medicine has been around for a very long time, and so even though it hasn't been thinking about thinking before, I really think this is probably the first force. That is, this is the earliest attempt to explain mental behaviors. If we look at Wilhelm Wundt in Leipzig, he was doing experiments based on perception and sensation. The idea being that intelligent people were able to perceive things and to respond to things much better, supposedly, than people who are less intelligent. This was kind of a rudimentary IQ test. Even Freud was interested in neurobiology, looking at, this is the brain, but why does it work the way that it does? If all of our brains are, very similar structure, why is one person a murderer, but another person is, something much better? So maybe a very good parent, a loving individual. Why is that? Then we could talk about brain specialization. There are different lobes in the brain. There are different cortical areas in the brain. And then as we go much smaller than that, we talk about neurotransmitters, chemicals that send messages into the brain. We talk about hormones, neurotransmitters. I talked about that, sorry. Let's say that schizophrenia, anxiety, and depression are all linked to neurotransmitters and different things that occur in the brain. The gist of biological psychology is that everything you do comes from some sort of internal mechanical action in the brain. Hello, and this is biological psychology. I'm not going to read each one of these. Please read these as I speak a little bit about each one. I think the main thing about Darwin was obviously that people were more closely related to animals than had previously been thought. But the other big thing really is that he planted the idea that the Earth was quite a bit older, and hence there was a lot longer period of time for people and animals to develop, and that there was a larger parallel between humans and animals than had previously thought. The next one, Heb, is pretty much just what biological psychology is. Everything that you do and everything that you think has some biological origin in your brain. And Ramachandran, talking about this mysterious phenomenon where people feel pain in a limb that has been amputated, or in some cases they were not even born with. That is, someone who was not born with legs can have pain in their legs. It talks about heritability, genetics, brain damage. The other one would be birth defects. Please notice there are congenital birth defects and genetic birth defects. A congenital defect is one where the baby was fine, but the mother came into contact with a teratogen, could be alcohol or radiation of some kind, that the baby would have been fine, but now is not. A genetic disorder, obviously, is one where when the egg and the sperm met, then that was it. That baby was going to have some sort of disorder, no matter what. This first part is interesting, is that drugs, illegal drugs that can be, you can become addicted to, almost always mimic chemically a neurotransmitter. Hyperthyroidism can also cause depression. I just want to talk about a couple of things about the brain. One specific story that I remember, and I don't remember where I heard it, but a person was having brain surgery done and they, I don't know, were doing some kind of experiment. I really don't remember the whole story, but this man was having brain surgery done. He was on the operating table, and you're awake during most brain surgeries. They took an electrode and stimulated a cortical area of the brain, and he raised his arm up, and then the surgeon said, I want you to put your arm down while still stimulating that part of the brain. And of course, he couldn't. And so the patient actually told the doctor, I guess your electricity is stronger than my will. I think that kind of sums up, to some extent, what biological psychology is. It's not about frustration. It's not about unresolved conflicts. It's not about environmental stimuli so much, in so much as that stimuli creates machinations in the brain that produce some sort of behavior, that your will is not really included. The other one was about laughter. If you laugh, let me see if I can do this. You laugh and there's nothing funny going on. One of the other stories is that if you laugh and there's nothing funny going on at all, you're laughing for no reason, brain chemicals, positive brain chemicals that are associated with laughter and things being funny will be released anyway. It's as if the brain cannot tell the difference. So let's see if I can do this. Ha 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 ha. I just can't do it. So you start laughing when there's nothing funny and the brain chemicals are released, whether you are really laughing at something that's funny or not. I think I mentioned this in one of the PowerPoint interludes, but there's another video called Opponent Process Part 2, Neurons. And neuron transmission and the way that messages are sent from one neuron to another is all in there, and I don't want to take up any time here to do that. These slides are pretty self-explanatory. Biological psychology's probably main contribution are all of the drugs that they have given to treat psychological disorders. Anti-anxiety drugs like Xanax, Valium, Boost Bar, which is not really that good, but that's one of them. Antidepressants, Zoloft and Prozac come to mind. Antipsychotics like Thorazine, those are really, really heavy, not the kinds of things you'd want to be on. In many cases with antipsychotics specifically, the side effects are so strong that the person does not like to stay on them. With anti-anxiety and antidepressants, sometimes a person must be on those for 3 to 4 weeks, so maybe 20 to 30 days before they start to really feel the full effect. One of the complications then in therapy is getting a person to actually stick with that medication when it doesn't seem to be doing what it is that they want it to do. The scanning tools, MRI, CAT, and PET. I didn't put functional PET where they add color so that you can see areas where more blood is flowing or the temperature is hotter there to see which parts of the brain are functioning during a certain task. Probably the biggest thing is that Biol Psych is very objective. You don't have to guess about schizophrenia or what it is in the brain that's happening, because biological psych has already kind of shown that. Now, it doesn't explain everything, and in some cases we're just not really sure how things work. The brain is a very complicated organ. I guess in summation, what I really want to say about biological psychology is that it's all about damage to the brain, problems with the brain, genetic predispositions, and things you have inherited, as well as diseases that you get. The reason that you have this particular behavior is because you have this particular disorder. There's not room for free will. There's not room for external triggers. Primarily, everything that you do comes from your brain. So if there's problems in your behavior, that must be in the brain. Usually there are surgeries, medical therapies, or drug therapy that's used to correct those problems. And really, it doesn't look at much more than that. Hence, the gist of the perspective is that if there's something wrong with you, then there must be a medically oriented treatment. If not to cure it, then to treat symptoms. Like many other perspectives, the biological perspective does not do a good job of explaining everything. If there's a traumatic event and a person suddenly gets an anxiety disorder or a mood disorder, maybe they're depressed all the time, biological psychology is excellent at describing symptoms and prescribing a treatment, but I don't think that it has a very good origin story. If you didn't get this disorder in a car crash that damaged your brain, or it is not a genetic heritability factor, then how does a person get that? I don't think that biological psych has a good job of explaining that. Individual differences or variability. It is possible to get schizophrenia genetically, but it is also possible to get schizophrenia from a very specific parenting style. Well, how is that? Because schizophrenia has to do with dopamine malfunction, so to speak, in the brain. How can you get, quote unquote, get that or get sick from a type of social interaction? That's not explained. And altruistic behavior is where one person gives up something really meaningful to them, oftentimes their life, in order to save somebody else. I think in many cases, though, the biological perspective is really what psychology needs to some extent in order to show itself to be a true science. Now, some would take offense to that, saying that it's biological psychology is a pseudoscience. But I think in many cases, if someone is biologically depressed, I don't think there's too many different ways to really doubt that. You can show brain waves, you can show neurotransmitters, you can show types of brain activity, and those certain types of brain activity go with certain personalities. I think that part is very difficult to prove incorrect. Oh, I forgot. One other thing that I wanted to talk about with biological psych is in some cases, well, in many cases, there are neurotransmitters that do more than one job within the brain. Several different neurotransmitters may have 2, 3, or 4 or more different quote-unquote jobs in the brain. They may have to do with attention and learning and all, like many different things. We don't really know what each one of the neurotransmitters actually does and how many different kinds of signals that each one can send. And that's, oh my gosh, bite just cut there.